So let's begin. So welcome, Seth. Welcome to the talk show. Thank you for taking out some time to speak with me today. And before we move forward, could you please briefly introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thank you so much, Ro. My name is Seth Yakatan, and I am one of the founders of a consulting firm called Katan Associates. That is a boutique investment and merchant bank focused on life sciences, cannabis, and
Okay.
direct-to-consumer marketing companies.
Okay, great. And where is this company located?
We're located in Los Angeles,
Mm-hmm.
and I have affiliates and associates globally. So I think the total N of the consulting firm is about 11.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an intergenerational firm. It was a firm that my father started, and I joined him in 2001, and have kept the beat alive for a while. So
Okay, great. What was the motivation behind starting this company?
my dad grew up in an orphanage, and he was a very successful serial entrepreneur and salesman, really originally in life sciences. So in the
Okay.
70s, he became the senior vice president of sales and marketing, and then COO of one of the largest research products companies.
Mm-hmm.
In that, so people that were doing fundamental biotech research from kind of 1970 to 1985, 70% of the products that were in the lab were from companies that my dad had started.
Okay.
So I grew up at 13 years old, knowing that I was going to be an entrepreneur
Mm-hmm.
and that I was going to be doing transactions for the rest of my life, because that's what I wanted to do. So, there wasn't, it was just genetically encoded in the way that I function, I think.
Okay, great. And so, building on top of that, would you say that the entrepreneur life chose you?
Yeah, I mean, I think people talk about a lot of work-life balance. I don't want to say work is my life, but
Mhm.
most of the more meaningful relationships that I've had, I've gotten out of work, and most of the places that I've gone are because of work, and most of the more interesting people that I've met are because of work.
Okay.
With my dad's network from a very young age, from the time I was 10 to the time I was 20, I was able to meet 10 living Nobel Prize winners.
Oh, wow.
So, like
That's amazing.
you go dinner with a guy who's bought, who wrote his honors research thesis to get his PhD using your
Mhm.
dad's product, and
Oh,
it's
wow.
so it's been a really interesting life. So
Uh-huh. Oh, that's amazing. Wow.
yeah.
Where did you go to school and what was your major?
I went to the University of Denver
Uh-huh.
uh, for my undergraduate, and I got a double major in history and public affairs,
Oh,
which was
interesting.
totally 4 years of useless partying.
Okay.
Um, and I then went back to school and got an MBA in finance
Hmm.
at the University of California, Irvine. And
Okay.
that was actual real work.
Well, that's great. Amazing. So, what would you say is a basic skill set required by a person to start a business on their own?
You have to be driven.
Hmm.
I will probably at some point write a book, so maybe we can
Okay.
back channel on that. But
Uh-huh.
there's 12 personality types, right? As signs of the zodiac, and there's I don't know how many years of the Chinese zodiac, and based upon your birth year, and there's 31 flavors of Baskin Robbins, and
Okay.
kind of what I like to do is I like to figure out what people are, how they fit into the ecosystem, what they're good at.
Hmm.
Um, you can't make someone driven that's not driven.
Yeah.
So if you do not have the drive to be an entrepreneur, if you're not exceptionally well organized, if you're not pretty much type A and borderline obsessive, it ain't gonna work.
Mm, that's true.
So I don't know that you can innately just wake up one day and it's like being a professional football player. I
Hmm.
don't care how hard you work. A person like me, I don't care how hard I worked. I don't care what I did. I don't care what I was trying to do. There was no way. Professional football was not my future.
Hmm.
Entrepreneurialism, I think, is sometimes like that. Now, sometimes people fall into it and are exceptionally successful,
Hmm.
but I think the first thing that you have to have is drive. I think the second thing that you really have to have is conviction.
Hmm.
Why? You're usually going to fail, and you're going to
Yeah.
fail repeatedly. I like to tell people that most of the meaningful lessons that I have learned, the most meaningful lessons I've learned in my life were learned by making horrible mistakes, painful mistakes, career altering mistakes. And it's only through that that repeated blunt force trauma that I've been able to learn what you hope as you get older, because I'm 50, is that you're able to learn from those mistakes.
Hmm.
Fortunately, by the grace of some kind of higher power, I have been able to learn from those mistakes and use those to help me and acknowledge that. But I think, having that resiliency. So I would probably say the two things that you must have innately are drive and resiliency. And no matter how you're genetically encoded, that's either in you or you're not.
Hmm.
Um, and, I think belief in yourself, you have to be exceptionally confident. I have always been exceptionally confident.
That's great.
That's something that just comes, it's not there all the time, but it's just, if you don't have that confidence in what you're doing, if you need, reassurance and second guess yourself, and that's not you got to just go at some
Hmm.
time, regardless of what it means and what it costs and, what it's going to do. So I don't know, they're probably these three things.
Definitely. So while you were mentioning conviction, you mentioned that you had to go through a lot of hardships. So what were some of the hurdles that you had to go through while, setting up this business or, in general in life?
It's the journey, right? It's not
Hmm.
just setting up one thing. When I was younger, I kind of lived by this maxim of I always want what I can't have,
Hmm.
right? I'm 17 years old and I want to be running an investment bank. And, it's not going to happen because you
Hmm.
have to go through this, educative process. Um, I think to your question, I think it's just kind of, well, ask me the question again.
What were some of the hurdles that you had to face while setting up this business?
So I think it's really just acknowledgement of where you're at kind of in that
Uh-huh.
process of the journey,
Yeah.
right? So, your hurdles are always going to be different.
Hmm.
Sometimes you might have a hurdle where you're trying to go into a market that you don't have any, access into.
Hmm.
Most of the hurdles that people come up with, relative to starting a business is capital. How am I going to
Right.
go
Yeah.
get the capital that I need?
Hmm.
There's so many mistakes that you can make relative to raising capital.
Hmm.
I think that the hurdles are limitless,
Okay.
but I think it's having the conviction to overcome the rejection that you're going to get to a yes,
Hmm.
is probably the most important thing, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And what were some of the monumental successes that you faced while, going through this journey?
Serendipity.
Okay.
Um, so, everything that I do is kind of a process,
Hmm.
right? So I'll get involved in a company, I'll analyze it a specific way, I'll go out and talk to people about it a specific way, I'll come up with a hypothesis, I'll position how the hypothesis, and something will happen or it won't.
Hmm.
So if I, take that formulaic approach and I use portfolio theory and I do that 10 times a year, three things should work really well.
Hmm.
Okay. So I think understanding, that process, and figuring out how that process, is going to manifest. Again, ask me the question one more time.
What were some of your monumental successes?
The monumental successes you can't prognosticate,
Hmm.
right? So having faith in if you take a portfolio approach and things happen, they might not always happen the way that you're going to want them to. So the
Hmm.
4 or 5 things that I would point to as monumental successes probably were the ones that I didn't think going into it were going to be the biggest monumental successes.
Hmm.
But having faith in your conviction, your capabilities, and your process will just lead to more monumental successes. And the biggest successes that I've had have probably been through serendipity. I was in the right place at the right time and something happened because of my drive and because of the
Hmm.
process and because of that, methodology. Um, it's rare that I've just, said this is going to happen. I do put a lot out there. I do have a lot of conviction in my own powers of prognostication.
Yeah.
So I think, trying to be more holistic about directionally, here's where I, as an entrepreneur, could go with a variety of things, probably has led me to success
Okay.
repeatedly.
Yeah.
And it's less for me about trying to prognosticate where the success is and more to try and take a portfolio approach to success by implementing my process and my work. Something will result positively out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if 30% of what I say comes true, that's a good outcome. Why? If I take $10 million, right,
Mm-hmm.
and I say I'm going to give somebody $30 million back, and I only give them $20 million back because 30% of what I promised was true,
Mm-hmm.
that's not a bad outcome.
Yeah.
So, managing that expectation has led to success on a formulaic basis for me.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So for newcomers who are just, starting out their businesses this year, how difficult would you say is it to start a business in 2021, especially given this pandemic situation?
Depends what you're doing. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've gotten involved in a ton of direct to consumer marketing companies
Mm-hmm.
that seem to be doing exceptionally well.
Okay.
I think, hard times call for hard measures.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that I've seen that operate, retail storefront businesses that have failed in
Yeah.
COVID. There's people that I've seen who operate retail storefront businesses who have pivoted to being successful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're all met with the same circumstances. So I don't think, this environment makes it that much harder. You just have to be more creative. Um, I do ultimately think a lot of things come down to who you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and
Networking.
and and you're younger than I am,
Mhm.
and I'm not going to hold that against you.
Okay.
Um, but the value of my network at this point,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say it's priceless,
Mm-hmm.
but it's my best asset.
Yeah, that's a good
So
thing.
my capability to call someone that I know is a decision maker, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in a family office or in a fund or in a company or, in an investment bank or in, somebody who's selling services.
Mm-hmm.
My ability to kind of just cut to the front of the line um, is probably my biggest weapon at this point, and the fact that people trust me with things and I have I'm, kind of trafficking a lot of information, knowledge is really, positive power. So, um, I don't think it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
If it was easy, everybody could do it. But, I could give you examples of 5 or 6 companies that I've seen where, people who have never operated a business are being really, really, really successful. So I think
Mm-hmm.
if you want to do it, bake into the fact that, your conviction and your drive is eventually going to get you somewhere. And it might not lead you to where you thought you were going to get initially. It might lead you to something else. Right. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I completely agree with you with your statement that, having connections with the right type of people cuts you to the front of the line and you're able to, move forward very, very quickly. That's really
And
true.
for someone who's starting out, what I try to tell them is you might not be able to get to the connection yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
find the connector, right?
Yeah,
It's like the first tipping point book, right? Find
definitely.
that early adopter, find that connector.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could, if you're starting a business and you could find somebody like me who you think is a perfect fit for what you're doing, give that guy 5% of the company. Like
Yeah.
100% of nothing is nothing. If you can logarithmically increase your contact base to get to all the people that you think want to fund you, or get to all the people that you think want to buy your product, or get to all the people you think want to help you,
Mm-hmm.
1 and 1 is equal 3. 1 and 1 has to equal 3, or it's just going to be harder. So
Yeah,
anyway.
definitely. And so, like, most of the time, I understand you might be involved in work, but what do you do when you're not working?
Before COVID, I used to do a lot of yoga.
Okay.
Um, I live very close to the ocean, and
Mm-hmm.
I have a son who's in the ocean doing water sports quite a bit, and I'm
That's
usually
cool.
by the beach.
Hmm.
I like automobiles, and living in Los Angeles, it affords an excellent climate to drive automobiles. So I like to drive automobiles as well.
Okay.
So yoga, the ocean,
Hmm.
and automobiles.
Awesome. Any favorite kind of automobile?
I'm a Porsche enthusiast.
Okay, that's nice. Could you share an important lesson that you learned from life?
Um, just stay positive, you know.
Hmm.
Um, I think you live in a world where, you know, regardless of your political affiliation, you know, what's broadcasted is usually negativity.
Mm,
It's not, hey, we're, you know, found a vaccine that might work. It's, well, here's all the things that are wrong with what we're doing.
mm,
So it's,
that's true.
um, you know, I'm rather spiritual in the way that I look at things. And if you ever take the time to read the Old Testament of the Bible,
Hmm.
you will become a student of the fact very quickly that human life and consciousness is not guaranteed.
Mm,
So what I try to tell people that are very angst-ridden and in the moment, and, you know, very serious about what they're doing, you got to take a breath and chill for a minute, because human consciousness is not guaranteed in any
yeah,
way, shape, or form. So
that's very true. I agree
that's
with
what I
you.
would say. That's my big, you know, just chill for a minute. It's gonna be
Hmm.
okay. Watch the sunset tonight. Live another day. You're not gonna solve world hunger tomorrow. It's just not gonna happen. So
Yeah, absolutely. One day at a time. And what keeps you moving forward in life?
never look back.
Okay.
I don't know. You know, I mean, honestly, Ro, I'm 50.
Hmm.
Um, I have more energy. I'm busier. I'm working harder. I feel more connected and more energetic than I ever have in my life.
Hmm.
I don't know what that's a result of. Maybe just the place that I'm at,
Hmm.
the hardship that I've endured, the life that I've lived. But I don't know. It kind of comes back to what, you know, you and I talked about initially. You're either driven or you're not. You can't put that in you.
Mm,
And for some reason I'm on 11 all the time.
that's
And
amazing.
it's hard for me, to turn off.
Hmm. That's great. Okay. And do you have a favorite book? And if yes, then which is that book?
I like to read a lot. The book that it's not what's my favorite book, it's
Hmm.
the book that I think is good for other people. There's a book which is called Shantaram, uh,
Okay.
which is probably the best book I've ever
Hmm.
read. And there's a lesson in that book for everyone.
Okay. What's the book about in general?
Um, it's about a guy who is arrested in, I think, Australia for trafficking heroin,
Okay.
who escapes from jail
Hmm.
and emigrates illegally to Bombay, India.
Okay.
And it's about how he survives for 25 or 30 years on the streets of Bombay, India. And it
Wow.
is the most amazing book you will ever read. Go get it today on
Sounds
Amazon.
interesting.
It's a commitment. It's about 800
Uh-huh.
800 pages. It's not
Oh, okay.
it's not for the faint of heart, but, you know,
Okay.
you get your highlighter
Hmm.
and get ready to highlight passages, because there are it's a very powerful book.
Interesting. Okay. What's the best and worst part of being a CEO or running a company?
Um I don't know that there is a best part to running a company.
Okay.
Um you know, I've been CEO of probably 3 or 4 companies, and I don't love being the CEO.
Hmm.
Um, the reason that I don't love being the CEO is that, you know, you're just responsible for a lot of things that
Mm.
you have no control over. I'm going to
Yeah,
give you
that's
an
true.
example. Okay.
Hmm.
If you're the CEO of a public company,
Hmm.
the only thing that anyone cares about is the price of your stock.
Okay.
You could do everything right. You could have an amazing quarter. You could put out a bunch of press releases.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever's happening with these Reddit people could
Yeah.
crater the price of your equity.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do everything operationally right, and you have no capacity to effectuate, or very little,
Mm-hmm.
what the ultimate arbiter of your quantum of measure of success is.
Mm-hmm.
Conversely, you could do everything wrong and have a very valuable company.
Okay.
So, being the CEO is a thankless job.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that you really, I think, have to look in the mirror and say, am I ready to do this? And the reason is because most investors are going to expect that if you are the CEO of a company, you
Mm-hmm.
are the chief evangelical officer of that company. And
Mm-hmm.
because you're playing with my money,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to put that above your family,
Mm-hmm.
above your interests, above your mental well-being,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what the job is. So it's tough. It's
Mm-hmm.
not one that I like to take on, and it's one that you have to understand has a superbly high level of expectation associated with it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on that one because just like you mentioned, like if the company is public, then people definitely do care about the stocks and shares. Yeah. And for 2021, do you have a pledge or an aim?
Do I have a pledge or an aim for 2021?
Yeah.
Domination.
Okay.
Absolute domination is what I have for 2021. Get
Okay.
ready. Get ready.
Mm-hmm.
I think cannabis is going to explode. I'm spending about 75% of my time doing corporate and business development for a company called eaze.com, which is the
Okay.
largest delivery service in the world. We basically operate a online dispensary,
Mm-hmm.
and are the largest deliverer of cannabis in the state of California.
Mm-hmm.
Control about 10% of all consumer purchases in the state of California. Sorry about that.
No
And
problem.
are poised to go very largely out of state with an aim to become multi-state and large. So I plan to help ease to further dominate cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
And depending upon what happens relative to the liquidity or the downstream of that company, use that to articulate a much broader investment thesis in cannabis during the next 5 years. So stay tuned. I plan to dominate cannabis.
That's amazing. Great.
Dominate.
Okay. So we have reached the short rapid fire section of this interview. And I'm going to ask you short questions. Try to keep your answers short as well. And if you come across a question that you don't want to answer, you can say skip and I'll move on to the next one. Okay, so the first one is, are you an Android or iPhone person?
iPhone.
Coffee or tea?
Both.
Okay. What's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning?
Weigh myself.
Okay. Three things no one knows about you.
My middle name is Sutherland.
Okay.
I went to a Jewish preschool until
Mhm.
the time I was in kindergarten and learned Hebrew before I learned English.
Oh, great.
And I am a collector of uncirculated consecutive bills.
Okay. And what's the craziest thing someone has done for you?
The craziest thing someone has done for me,
Mhm.
I'd have to think about that. Off the
Okay.
top of my head, I don't know.
Okay, no problem. What's the one thing that you would like to change about yourself?
I'd just like to be in better shape. That's all.
Okay. Um, what's your spirit animal?
My spirit animal is my cat.
Okay. A rumor about you that you wish were true.
That I'm really rich.
Okay. What's the easiest way to piss you off?
Be late.
Okay. What's the one thing that you own that you wish you didn't?
Horses.
Okay. Um, what's the one thing that you're most afraid of?
Death by some horrible outcome like
Hmm.
fire or drowning or like falling off of a ski lift or something like that.
Okay. What's the most interesting thing you have in your purse or wallet?
I carry crystals around, so I have a lot. I have a lot of
Okay.
crystals. I have a lot of
Okay.
crystals.
Interesting. Um, according to you, what new technology will transform the future?
Synthetic cannabis, the expression of plant equivalent cannabinoids in a laboratory will
Okay.
be very, very, very important.
Oh, wow. That's great. And now you have to rate yourself from 1 to 10 on the following, 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. First one is quick learner,
7.5,
book enthusiast,
9,
as a leader,
6.3,
okay, as a CEO,
7.2,
as a friend.
11.
Okay, great. So with that, we have reached the end of this interview. And before I let you go, I just have one last question for you. Could you think of 3 other business owners or CEOs who might be interested in doing an interview with me and make an introduction? And
I absolutely would. And if you follow up and remind me via email, I will do that.
yeah, sure, absolutely. That'll be great. Okay, so with
Um,
that, we have
do you want me
reached.
to do you want me to give you those now or just
No,
follow
no,
up?
no, no, no. You can send that to me
Okay,
in LinkedIn or on email, however you feel comfortable in sharing that information with me.
good.
Okay, great. So, it was great having you on this talk show. Thank you for taking out some time to share glimpses
My
of your
pleasure.
life and
Thank you so
glimpses of
much.
your background. Thank you so much, for doing all that today.
My pleasure.
Great. Thank you, Seth. Thank you for coming today. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.